I call the member for Moncrieff.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Mindful of a very short period of time remaining, I have a number of questions for the Minister which I'll put succinctly and seek his assistance to provide transparency through succinct answers as well. And the three issues I'd like to raise pertain to the arts side of the Minister's portfolio. Would the Minister outline, for the benefit of the House and the Hansard, why, for example, the National Gallery of Australia had a funding cut from $31,400,000 down to $29,598,000. Screen Australia a funding cut from $93,641,000 to $89,398,000. And the National Archives of Australia also had a funding cut from $62,289,000 to $55,028,000. In addition to that, would the Minister also outline, please, whether or not the Minister is supportive of the draft Cooper recommendation that self-managed super funds not be able to invest in appreciating Australian artworks or indeed artworks more broadly? Minister, will you rule out that that will not in fact be adopted? And finally, would the Minister also outline what plans and proposals he has in place to in some way improve this very botched resale royalty scheme, many concerns of which have been expressed by all stakeholders and which has received significant media coverage in recent days?
Minister, in response.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Moncrieff for taking an interest in the appropriations and in this policy area, and I certainly look forward to continuing to engage with him on these issues, which we on this side of the House take very, very seriously. The provision of adequate resources for the cultural communities of Australia to enrich our lives and to build sustainability in their career paths as they do. Look, I'll return to the specific questions that the members asked me in a second, but just quickly deal with his queries about the Cooper report. And I've got the relevant minister sitting right next to me, member for Moncrieff. Look, it's a draft set of recommendations. The full set of recommendations have not yet been considered by the government. The government will haven't been handed to the government, I'm advised, and we will consider that full set of recommendations, which I understand will be delivered in the next month or so. And in doing that, we will be mindful of the impact that any recommendations may have on the viability of Australia's arts sector. We'll be mindful of that, and I intend to meet with representatives from the sector in the coming weeks. We want to hear their concerns, and we are aware that they are concerned about it, but I'd simply stress all we have in front of us at the moment is draft recommendations, and until there's a full and formal set of recommendations in front of the government, and the government's determined its response, that would be sufficient in terms of my reply to his question. I completely refute and reject the suggestion by the member for Moncrieff that the resale royalty scheme is going to be something which will not work effectively both now and in the long term. And I say that as someone who I know, has had an interest in small business over time, and would recognise that any small business that is responsible for the maintenance, the accurate maintenance of record keeping in relation to whatever business that it's involved in, will be able to effectively discharge the responsibilities under this scheme, i.e. to log the price of a piece of work and the name of the artist, and ensure that Copyright Agency Limited is informed of such. The Copyright Agency Limited, who will be responsible, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the administration of this scheme, was chosen after a careful evaluation, a tendering process conducted at arm's length from myself, and I'm very confident that they will be able to effectively discharge the scheme. It is not true, as the member suggests, that everybody is up in arms about the resale royalty scheme. In actual fact, artists have supported this scheme, and there's a very good reason why they should. This is the first time that Australia's visual artists will have a royalty. The first time. Hitherto, composers have had a royalty opportunities by way of copyright, authors do, photographers do. And why have visual artists been left out in the dark? And the reason is that when the Coalition was in government, they refused to take up the recommendations of the Meyer report by Mr Rupert Meyer for the introduction of a resale royalty scheme. And the reason for that is that Michael Kroger was enlisted by the galleries who had objections to this scheme to come up here to Canberra and to derail that scheme. I know for a fact that there were many on that side of the House who were supportive, and by the way, I welcome the member and the Coalition's ultimate support for this scheme. I'm very confident that we are going to be able to discharge this scheme in a way which is effective, economically, and delivers the benefits that are necessary for Aboriginal artists as a whole. Just finally, quickly to say, we also have organisations like NABA, like Desart, stakeholder organisations, peak bodies, who recognise how important it is at this point in time for Indigenous artists particularly, but Australian artists as a whole, to start receiving an appropriate benefit for their work. And I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is one of the most important and significant reforms that this government has brought forward. I'm very proud of it and I'm very confident of its success. Finally, to deal with the question of prudence in relation to bringing down a budget. We're very supportive of what's happening at the National Gallery and have provided significant funding opportunities for the refurbishment work that's taking place at the Gallery. And I think this is going to be a wonderful boon to the National Capital and to that jurisdiction there, which sees the National Gallery, the National Portraits Gallery, the High Court, the National Library and the like, all being wonderful places for the repository of the country's culture, but also a fantastic place for people to visit when they come to the National Capital. And this government has been very, very supportive of those institutions, and that's reflected in this budget. I was especially pleased to see the success that the National Gallery itself had with the Masterpieces exhibition, which many Australians came to visit. A tremendous success because of the
Minister's
government's
time has
support.
expired.